So many times in life we tend to hang on to the happy times, graduations, marriages, the birth of a child. But with life, as you probably know, there can be some pretty bad times too.
Something traumatic, life-threatening, or disastrous. Unfortunately for many people, they just can't shake those memories, and it really affects them. It's something called post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. The U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs says people who have it may experience hopelessness, shame, despair, depression, anxiety, relationship problems, and that's just a few symptoms.
PTSD is often associated with members of the military who've seen combat, but the truth is it can affect anyone. The VA reports about 60% of men experience at least one traumatic event in their lifetime. 8% of them will develop PTSD. The VA reports 50% of women will go through a trauma, and 20% of them will develop PTSD. For those who don't have it, PTSD can be very hard to understand, but it's really important to try to understand it, especially this time of year. So joining us today is psychologist Michael Finnegan, who is with the Peninsula Mental Health Services. Thank you so much. You're the director.
Yes,
there.
sir.
Appreciate you coming in. So let me ask you this. Let's go to basics. Why or how does PTSD develop?
There's four primary factors. Either a person has been a victim of a traumatic event or a life-threatening event. They have had a family member that has had a life-threatening event.
Right.
They've observed a life-threatening event directed towards some other individual. Or we can have first responders who part of their job is to deal with devastating events. So that's a key first criteria.
All right, so you talk about trauma, traumatic events. What kind of trauma can lead to PTSD?
Witnessing the death of an individual, seeing a horrible injury where a victim is not having the capacity to take care of themselves and is damaged. Those would be seeing a horrible piece of evidence that is very disturbing.
Yeah. Well, we mentioned some of the symptoms of PTSD, but it really goes a lot farther than that. What other effects can somebody suffer from PTSD?
Well, what happens is there can be a change in, and these are criteria that we use for diagnosis, is that there is an increased sense of arousal, irritability that can be present in the individual. That nervous system that serves to protect us gets elevated, so we're on edge. We can react very quickly. Also that we have thoughts, thoughts that can be our fault or a foreshortened future.
Yeah.
Oftentimes we will see avoidant behaviors where the individual will want to avoid situations like fireworks, as an example, this time of year, where the loud explosion reminds them of them being in Fallujah or in a war zone. And another very important component or criteria that we look for are intrusive thoughts, memories, recurrent nightmares, or in the worst of situations, flashbacks, where the person really is taken back to when the traumatic event occurred.
Can children develop PTSD?
Yes, they can. There's different criteria that is utilized for children below the age of 6, and they process it differently, but it's important to address it.
So there are certain triggers.
Yes. The triggers can be what we refer to as psychological proximity. So let's say that we have an individual that we see a crime victim, and that crime victim is wearing a particular color or pattern of pants. And then we're out on the street a year later, and we see that same pattern of pants. It can pull us back to the event, a backfire on a car, and it can pull us back to a shooting incident that we were involved with.
So what do you do if you're experiencing these symptoms?
Well, first of all, that a healthy adaptive trait is to address and not avoid the issue. This idea that it just kind of goes away, for some people that is the case, but you don't know if you're going to be the lucky one or not. When we look from the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, about 8.9% of individuals have a lifetime possibility of developing post-traumatic stress disorder from birth to 75 years of age. And so you get good care. This is not one of those situations where you suppress the symptoms with medicine. This is where you have to drill down under your control, under your choice, and to address these thoughts and these ideas. To learn ways of how to calm that nervous system, not through taking the alcohol or the drug, but learning ways in which we can calm ourselves, to self-soothe.
What about those of us who don't have it, and someone we love perhaps may have it? Is there something we can do to help?
Yes, well, that increased sensitivity, and so you can look for a startle response, an abrupt change, looking at a person's face, their tone of voice, and when you see that rapid departure from that typical way of interacting, they become sullen, quiet, withdrawn, to say, hey, are you doing okay? You don't have to be the psychologist or the psychiatrist, right? You're just being that loving family member, but you're conveying a sense of hope. Hey, we can get this taken care of. Sometimes a bad thing, we can utilize that bad thing to make an improvement.
Just be sensitive.
Right. That increased sensitivity, but to take action, to act decisively. Hey, let's go call the doctor. Let's go and find out about good care. They can go to your website where there are links, or our website where you can go to a link to gain that information, to give knowledge, to put you on a path to recovery. You do not have to spend the rest of your life, as we said in Southeast Asia following the tsunami, you don't have to live your life living in the shadow of the wave.
Right.
All right.
Wow, that's good. Dr. Michael Finnegan, Director of Peninsula Mental Health Services, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome.
Now, if you would like to know more about PTSD, just go to WWOC.com and click on our picture at the top of the page. When he explains it that way, it's so much easier to understand. Understand more. Now, did you catch what Dr. Finnegan said about fireworks? For those with PTSD, they can be traumatizing. And
combat veterans are trying to spread the word. Take a look at this sign. Perhaps you've seen something like it on social media. It reads, "Combat veteran lives here. Please be courteous with fireworks."
Okay, so how can you do that? Well, according to EcoMerge, consider attending a public fireworks display instead of setting off your own. Talk with the veterans around you to see if fireworks would indeed upset them. If you're planning on setting off fireworks, tell your neighbors what time and for how long. And you can also minimize the amount of fireworks that you plan on setting off. Finally, don't pull off any surprises by setting off fireworks when they're least expected, like during the day, because anything that we can do to help those who sacrificed all, we really should.
Absolutely. And sticking with those who put their lives on the line, still to come, we meet a Navy reservist who not only gives back with his service, but in his civilian life too. He shares his story next.
And a little later on, we're sharing with you the recipes for a tasty summer seafood and salad. We're making a mahi-mahi dish with a fresh blueberry salad. Del Mar Life will be right back.